Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
Support the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. I promise even more interesting stories. I remember the exact moment she said it. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the way she said them. Soft, measured, rehearsed. Like she had practiced in the mirror a dozen times before finally sitting me down at the kitchen table that Sunday morning. We were both nursing mugs of coffee, the kind of quiet, peaceful moment I used to think meant we were okay. I had just made her favorite cinnamon oat pancakes, the ones I usually saved for birthdays or anniversaries, but she hadn't touched them. She kept looking at the clock, like there was somewhere else she needed to be. "I've been thinking," she began, sliding her spoon slowly around the rim of her mug. "I think we should try opening up our relationship." There was no stutter, no hesitation, just a calm, cool delivery that hit me like a sucker punch. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I just blinked at her across the table, wondering if this was some kind of social experiment, a prank, or maybe some twisted hypothetical. She smiled, tight-lipped, almost apologetic. "I know it's a lot to take in, but we've been in a rut. Things feel stagnant. And I love you. I really do, but I don't think we should limit ourselves. A lot of couples do this now. It's healthy, even empowering." That word, empowering, rubbed like sandpaper across my brain. She said it like she was offering me a raise or a promotion, not shoving a knife between my ribs. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. But instead, I just stared at her and nodded, slowly. She took that as understanding. "I'm not saying we go crazy or anything," she continued, her eyes drifting back to the clock again. "We could set boundaries. Rules. I don't want to wake up in 10 years and feel like I missed out on something." Oh, there it was. The real reason. Missed out on something. I wasn't enough. I didn't argue. I didn't storm off. I just excused myself, went upstairs, and closed the door. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't new. This had been building for months. Maybe longer. The late-night gym sessions that lasted 3 hours. The phone glued to her hand at dinner, face down, but lighting up every few minutes. The abrupt changes in wardrobe, cropped tops, tighter dresses, a sudden obsession with lingerie she didn't seem to wear around me. I hadn't wanted to believe it. I had made excuses for every single red flag because I loved her, because we had history, because I thought love was about patience and compromise. But in that silence, behind the bedroom door, I realized what I'd really been doing all these years. I had been stepping aside, letting her take more and more, convincing myself that she'd come back around. Instead, she'd built a fantasy in her head, one where I was just the loyal husband holding down the fort while she explored what the world had to offer. I didn't ask who the guy was. Not yet. But I knew there was someone. That suggestion of an open relationship wasn't born from theory or curiosity. It came from desire, from opportunity, from someone already in the picture, waiting in the wings. That night, I told her I needed time to think. She said of course. She acted gentle, understanding, maybe even relieved. She probably expected resistance. An argument. A long-winded plea to stay faithful. She didn't expect me to say nothing. But silence is louder than screaming, and I watched her unravel slowly from that moment forward. She kept trying to guide the conversation back to logistics, how we'd make it work, where the boundaries would be, what counts and what doesn't, all while acting like she hadn't just set fire to the foundation of our marriage. She went on a girls' night out 3 days later. She came home at 2:17 a.m., hair tousled, shoes in hand, her breath heavy with the scent of some cheap aftershave I'd never worn a day in my life. She didn't say a word. Neither did I. I was already 3 moves ahead. Because while she thought she was in control of the game, she hadn't realized something crucial. I hadn't said yes. I'd said nothing at all. And in that silence, I was preparing something she'd never see coming. I just needed one piece. And it came wrapped in a sundress and a knowing smile. 2 weeks later, when her best friend Rachel knocked on my door, alone. Rachel wasn't someone I ever really noticed before, not in the way I probably should have. She was just Lily's best friend, the one always tagging along on brunch dates, girls' trips, late-night FaceTime calls. The friend I'd wave to at parties and barely speak to otherwise. Polished, confident, a little too quick with her opinions, but always polite to me. So when she showed up that Friday evening, standing on my doorstep with a bottle of wine in one hand and an oddly tight smile on her face, I didn't know what to think. Lily wasn't home. She told me she had plans. Again, no explanation. I know this is weird, Rachel said, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. But, do you mind if I come in for a minute? I opened the door, wordlessly, and stepped aside. She didn't waste time. Barely 5 minutes in, after some awkward small talk, she sat down on the couch and looked me straight in the eyes. She's already doing it, you know? I didn't ask what she meant. She kept talking anyway. She's seeing some guy. Says he's different. That he listens and makes her feel seen. That she finally feels alive. Whatever that means. She rolled her eyes. But the way she talks about you. Rachel paused. Looked down at the glass in her hand like it held the rest of her sentence. Then, softly. It's not okay. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. I'd suspected it, of course. But hearing it spoken aloud, confirmation that the woman I loved had already started rewriting the rules of our marriage without even pretending to honor the terms, still stung. She said you'd agree to it eventually, Rachel added. That you'd cave, like always. There it was. That was the story Lily had sold her closest friend. That I was predictable, passive, easy to manipulate. Rachel took a sip of wine, then reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. I probably shouldn't show you this, she said, hesitating. I didn't speak. I didn't have to. She handed it to me. It was a screenshot of a group chat. 3 people. Lily, Rachel, and someone named Kay. Lily, he's already halfway broken. He just doesn't know it yet. Lily, I could tell him I want to bring someone home, and he'd probably say okay as long as I smile after. Lily, I give it 2 weeks. Once he sees how much happier I am, he'll cave. Watch. My jaw tightened. My grip on the phone did too. Rachel watched me, almost cautiously. I didn't mean to snoop, she said. But she left her phone out. And I don't know. I just had a bad feeling. I handed it back. My heart wasn't racing. No fire in my chest. Just something colder. Steadier. Calculated. Rachel studied me for a moment, like she was searching for some trace of rage or pain or maybe even gratitude. Then she said something I wasn't prepared for. She doesn't deserve you. I raised an eyebrow. You're her best friend. I used to be, she said quietly. There was a pause. A long one. Charged with something I didn't recognize yet but felt shifting between us. Then Rachel smiled, a slow, almost amused smile. She thinks she's exploring freedom, she said. But you're the one learning control. She stood up, stepped toward the door. Anyway, just thought you deserved to know. As she reached for the handle, I said, Rachel. She turned. Want to grab coffee sometime? There was no hesitation. Yeah, she said. I like that. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. Lily had kicked down the walls of our marriage expecting to find an open field. Instead, she gave me a gate. And now I held the key. She'd made the rules. I was just about to play by them better than she ever could. Because if she thought I'd sit back and let her play games with my heart, she had no idea how quiet, how devastating, checkmate could be. It didn't happen quickly. Rachel and I didn't dive into some whirlwind revenge affair. It wasn't like that. At first, we were just 2 people picking through the rubble of a shared betrayal, her from the sidelines, me from the center of the blast. But there was a shift. A slow one. The first time we met for coffee, we talked about everything but Lily. Music. Work. Our mutual distaste for small talk. The second time, we laughed more than we probably should have. And by the third, she was texting me good night. Still, it wasn't physical. Not right away. I didn't want to be the guy who used someone else to get even. I wanted to be deliberate. I wanted it to mean something. Maybe that makes me sound righteous, but trust me, it wasn't virtue. It was strategy. Because while Rachel and I were inching toward each other, Lily was spiraling. The man she'd been seeing, her shiny, new awakening, vanished just as fast as he appeared. 1 minute he was texting her at all hours, making her feel desirable, powerful. The next, radio silence. No calls. No replies. Ghosted. She didn't tell me that, of course. But I could see it. I can see the way she paced the living room with her phone like it owed her something. The way she'd slammed the bathroom door and cry into towels when she thought I couldn't hear. The way her ego, not her heart, was bleeding. She started asking me weird questions at dinner. So, are you seeing anyone? No, I said. She smiled, too smug, too relieved. You know you can, right? She added. We agreed on that. Did we? That shook her. Only for a moment, but it was enough. She started dressing up more. Making dinner again. Complimenting me out of nowhere. It was subtle, but I could feel her scrambling to regain control, trying to reset the balance. I let her try, and all the while, Rachel and I kept getting closer. It wasn't just chemistry, it was alignment. She saw me, not as a placeholder, not as a wallet, not as some fading memory of who I used to be. She saw me as I was now, quiet, deliberate, fully awake for the first time in years. The night it finally happened, it wasn't planned. She came over after a movie. We sat on the couch, wine in hand, knees barely touching. "I don't want to be careful anymore," she whispered. Neither did I. It was slow, intimate, honest. No rush, no masks. Just two people exhaling everything we'd held in for far too long. And afterward, she didn't rush to get dressed. She didn't check her phone. She just curled up beside me and said, "I'm glad it was you." That meant something. I recorded the moment, not for the act, but for what came after. The conversation, the laughter, the honesty. Rachel spoke openly about how she had watched Lily manipulate me for years. How many times she'd wanted to say something. How relieved she was that I wasn't the fool Lily thought I was. That recording wasn't a weapon. It was proof of context, of clarity, of who was really in control. A few days later, Lily came home early from work. I was in the kitchen, pouring myself a drink. She leaned against the counter, biting her lip like she was about to say something she hadn't rehearsed for once. "Hey," she said too softly. "We should talk." I didn't look up. "Sure. About what?" I don't know. Us, maybe." I finally turned, looked her in the eyes, and waited. She fumbled. "I feel like I rushed things. The open relationship thing. It wasn't about you, it was about me and I. I might have made a mistake." That was the first time she used that word. Mistake. And I almost felt bad for how calmly I replied. "I know." She blinked. "You know?" I nodded. "That you made a mistake." "Yeah, I figured that out a while ago." She tilted her head, trying to read me. "Are you with someone?" There it was. I didn't lie. "Yeah." Her breath caught. Just a little. Enough for me to notice. "Who?" I didn't answer. Not because I was afraid, but because I wanted her to sit with the silence. To feel the uncertainty she had dumped on me and labeled liberation. Later that night, I sent her a video. Not of anything explicit. Just Rachel, sitting on my couch, her voice clear and calm as she said, "She doesn't respect you, you know. She talks about you like your background noise." I didn't say a word when Lily saw it. She didn't either. She just stood there, staring at her phone, her hands trembling. She hadn't lost me when she asked for an open relationship. She lost me the moment she thought I wouldn't know how to play the same game better. And now? Now she was finally realizing she'd never had control to begin with. Lily unraveled in silence. It started small, missed alarms, forgotten errands, coffee left untouched and cold on the counter. But you could feel it in the air around her. That quiet panic of someone who thought they were in charge of the chessboard, only to realize they were just another piece being moved. I didn't gloat. I didn't even act different. That's what drove her mad. She expected anger. A confrontation. Yelling. Some dramatic monologue where I accused her of betrayal and begged for answers. But instead, I was calm. Precise. Unbothered. I took longer showers. Spent more time at the gym. Smiled more when I checked my phone. Not to throw anything in her face. Just enough for her to wonder. And the wondering? That ate her alive. Then came the night it broke. It was a Thursday. She'd cooked dinner for the first time in weeks. Some sad attempt at recreating one of my favorites. She poured us wine, wore lipstick I hadn't seen since our anniversary 2 years ago, and kept brushing her hand across my arm at the table like that would undo the months of distance and mockery. Halfway through the meal, she finally snapped. "Are you sleeping with someone?" I didn't flinch. Just took a sip of wine and said, "Does it matter?" She stared at me, like she didn't recognize the person sitting across from her. That's not an answer. I leaned back in my chair. "You're right. It's not." She stood up, pushed her plate away with too much force. "You think this is funny? You think you can just punish me for something we agreed on?" And there it was again, we agreed. She still couldn't admit that she hadn't invited me into anything. She'd presented it like a discussion, but it was a declaration. A script she assumed I'd follow like the loyal, predictable husband she thought I was. "You said you were okay with it," she shouted. "No, I said I'd think about it. And while you were off living your new truth, I realized something important." She crossed her arms, glaring. I stood slowly, walked to the drawer, pulled out my phone, tapped the screen, and played a short clip. Rachel's voice filled the room. She talks about him like he's some lifeless placeholder. Like he's too scared to stand up for himself. It's pathetic, honestly. He deserves better. Lily's face changed immediately. From defiance to confusion to rage. You recorded her? You recorded my best friend. I tilted my head. No. I recorded my conversation with someone who chose honesty. She was already dialing her phone. You're lying. She wouldn't. But Rachel didn't pick up. Instead, Lily's phone buzzed with a message that made her face go pale. Rachel, I'm not part of your cover anymore. I told him the truth. You need help. She dropped the phone onto the table like it burned. Then she looked at me, eyes red and wet, mascara smudging the corners. You ruined everything. No, I said calmly. You did. She reached for me, out of desperation, not affection. We can fix this. We made mistakes. I stepped back. I didn't make a mistake. I made a decision. And I meant that. Because for the first time in our marriage, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't playing catch up to her whims or making excuses for her selfishness. I was acting with purpose. You wanted freedom, I said. Well, here it is. She broke then. Not loud. Not violently. Just collapsed into the chair. Shoulders slumped. Fingers trembling. A quiet sob escaping between breaths she couldn't steady. The woman who once spoke to me like I was background noise now couldn't form a sentence without begging for a response. But I was done giving her one. By the time I grabbed my coat and headed toward the door, she finally asked the question I'd been waiting for. Was it Rachel? I paused, turned just enough to look at her over my shoulder, and said, without anger, without pride, just the truth. Yes. She didn't scream. She didn't cry louder. She just nodded once, as if the last thread holding her illusion together had finally snapped. When I walked out that night, I didn't slam the door. I didn't burn bridges. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because some stories don't end with fireworks or explosions. Some end with a quiet door click and the realization that you weren't the weak one. You were just patient. And patience? It's far more terrifying than rage. People say closure is a conversation. For me, it was silence. Lily didn't chase me. Not really. She texted a few times that first week. One-liners. Fishing lines. I still love you. We can fix this. This isn't who we are. I never responded. She stopped texting after she saw the paperwork. My lawyer had it hand-delivered to her office. No drama. No angry notes. Just the facts, neatly bound and signed. She cried then, Rachel told me later. Not in some grand, emotional breakdown, but the kind of quiet sobbing you do when no one's watching. When you realize the thing you thought you could always manipulate has finally slipped through your fingers for good. And the irony? I didn't hate her. I didn't even really miss her. I missed who I thought she was. Who she pretended to be when things were easy and I was too blind to see the cracks forming beneath her smiles. Rachel and I didn't become some instant love story after that. That's not how it works. We kept things slow. Honest. She was there when I needed someone to talk to, someone to laugh with, someone to remind me that not all relationships are built on power plays and manipulation. But we didn't rush it. Because I learned something crucial in all of this. Love doesn't ask you to be less. It doesn't make you feel like a burden for having boundaries, or a fool for expecting loyalty. Love doesn't need leverage. It just shows up. And Lily? She showed up for herself. Every time. Until no one else did. But there was another path I could have taken. If I had just said no from the start, if I had refused the open relationship, laid down boundaries, told her it was us or nothing, maybe things would have unfolded differently. Maybe she wouldn't have strayed. Maybe she would have respected that I was standing firm. But I know now that wouldn't have saved us. Because someone who needs a leash to be loyal was never loyal to begin with. All I would have done is delay the betrayal, give her more time to hide it better. And the damage? Would have still landed. Just later. Just harder. I've often imagined a different outcome, one where I lost control. Where I confronted her in front of everyone. Posted the recordings. Named names. Exposed her online. Let her crumble publicly the way she deserved. But then what? I'd look like the bitter one. The unstable one. The man who couldn't handle his wife's freedom. And she? She'd wear the victim mask like a crown. People would line up to tell her she was brave, that she escaped a controlling man, that her truth was misunderstood. The sympathy she craved would be hers. And me? I'd be another cautionary tale wrapped in anger and humiliation. Instead, I left her with the only thing she truly fears. The truth. The quiet. And a door that will never open again. She insisted we open our relationship. I just showed her what it looks like when the wrong door closes behind you permanently.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.